everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Bobber Academy. This is episode 5, 5G behind the scenes. And today we have some special guests. We have folks from FreedomFi, from Nova Labs, and from Embedded Works. But first things first, I wanted to tell everyone congratulations, we did it. 5G mobile Genesis is up and running as of August 12th. 5G mobile has been working all around the US, and 100 million mobile tokens are being distributed out daily to users with 5G miners attached to their radio, or radios attached to their miner. So if you have an outdoor radio that you've had set up since Mobile Genesis, you're probably sitting on close to 1 million mobile tokens in your wallet. And if you have an indoor radio, you're probably close to about 500,000 mobile tokens. We've only had a few setbacks and delays for the Genesis, but now the bugs have been pretty much all worked out and things are running pretty smoothly. So to learn a little bit more about what's been happening behind the scenes and how everything's been going, let me introduce some of our special guests for today's episode. We have Boris from FreedomFi, we have Jeremy from Nova Labs, we have Andy from Embedded Works, and last but not least, my co-host Ann from Bobcat. To start things off, I'd like to go around the room and let everyone give a brief introduction of who they are, who they work for, and what they do at their company. So I'll start from Boris. Do you want to kick off for us?
Sure. I think you kind of did the introduction for me already. I'm Boris from FreedomFi. Well, so until recently, I was the CEO at FreedomFi. I think most people in the Helium community know FreedomFi. And recently, we've been acquired by Nova Labs. So now, I'm operationally largely continuing in a kind of similar capacity in that most of the Nova Labs work related to Helium 5G deployments and hardware roadmap, and even to an extent, some of the contributions that we do at the foundation level related to thought leadership on the blockchain side. I touch in some shape or form, but now in the new capacity as a team member at Nova Labs.
Great. Thank you, Boris. Andy, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Andy Doe here, president of Embedded Works. We are a wireless-centric integrator, distributor, been around for 16, 17 years now. And we started out version 1.0 of the company selling wireless components. So all the buzzword technologies like Zigbee, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, 2G, all the way to the 5G. So we help people build IoT devices, and pre-IoT buzzword, it was M2M for me. So machine to machine is the world that I came from. And we help people integrate radio modules from Wi-Fi modules and cellular. And as we evolved as a company, version 2.0, we got into the data connectivity business, became an MVNO. So we have a couple of brands that we offer as we move up the stack. Version 3.0, we launched a GPS tracking platform called, I think, Tracking for Less, one of these icons, Tracking for Less, and that our platform ingests pretty much anything that has location data. And I'm proud to report that we have Helium as part of that network that we can now track. And then, of course, finding things where things are at is also as exciting as how things are doing. So we launched SensorWorks, and SensorWorks is our platform to ingest sensor data. And then, of course, during the pandemic, we had a lot of interest for public hotspots. With the COVID CARES Act, people wanted to have safe surfing, so we launched Wi-Fi Works. So overall, whatever works, but our company essentially is an integrator, and we're very happy to now be involved in now the next iteration of Helium, which is the 5G mining. And in fact, we launched another brand called Miner Works coming soon to a theater near you.
That's great. Thanks so much, Andy. And Jeremy?
Hi, I'm Jeremy Cooper. I'm officially a software engineer at Nova Labs. But I've often been called, and I enjoy this term. Someone else labeled me, one of the team members had said, I'm a free electron. So that means that I do a lot of different things, including some work with the foundation on the manufacturing compliance committee, which I started out doing, and then over time adopted more and more roles, including uh, coming over to Nova. And my background is in radio and security and hardware and software development. Those are the big things that drive me. And so the opportunity to be involved with something like Helium was just a no-brainer. It actually took me a couple of years to make certain that's definitely wanted to do, and I really regret that I waited that long. But so that's how I interact with the chain and all of this technology really at that level, these different pieces. Helium brings all of those together. And I'm happy to be here in whatever capacity is needed, because I do have a lot of hats and it can be a little confusing. But as we go through this, we'll find out what the questions are.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeremy. And do you want to say a little bit? Or we all know you now?
I'm Jess's co-host. Hi, I'm Jess's co-host.
All right. So let's get into some of the questions. So we've officially entered into phase 2 of Mobile Genesis as of August 29th, which should minimize delays for daily rewards from 17 hours to 30 minutes. But it seems there's a little bit of a delay. Some of the payouts are still around 24 hours at this time. I'm not sure when that is changing, but I guess give it a little bit. But eventually we'll get there and move into phase 3. So my first question is, when do you think we'll move into phase 3?
Yeah, it might be good to describe what is phase 3.
Yeah.
Do you have the bullet points about that?
I could pull it
I
up.
have it all in my head.
Yeah. Let me see if I
I
can.
think phase 3 is to speed, test, and quality of service. So right now, you just basically get mobile dropped to your wallet as soon as you have a radio connected and verified. But there's really no speed test or speed check for how good the radio is providing the connectivity. So I guess that's kind of an overview of phase 3. And I saw on Discord the other day, people are already downloading the logs on the gateway to see are the speed tests happening and who's providing the test services. And they want to know, oh, when is this going to happen? And so yeah, that's interesting to see that we're actually already at phase 2 because we're moving pretty fast.
Yeah, so I can comment on it, and then Jeremy, to the extent that he wants to contribute, can do as well. The speed test implementation is pretty much ready. We are going to roll it out imminently, like in a couple of weeks. So it's working. We just wanted to do some like final tuning before rolling into production. We also kind of feel now that there's an increased sense of urgency to get it officially implemented, because we do see that a lot of people are plugging in their radios and gateways into not so great sources of backhaul. So it is coming. I never really thought of a kind of a backhaul testing being, like phase 3 per se. It's more of like a feature that got delayed for the Genesis launch. Generally speaking, the next phase is all about basically, like moving away from the current fairly dumb way of, almost like airdropping the tokens to people that have deployed radios, to something significantly more intelligent that will be based on the actual coverage that the radios are providing. And, there is a number of things that we're working on in that direction, which, we can talk about separately. But, if in your definition, phase 3 is backhaul testing, then that's going to be there like in a week or two. And it's not going to be like a grand rollout. It's going to be just like over the air updates for the gateways that will just happen. and a lot of people with crappy backhaul will just all of a sudden see that they're no longer getting rewards. And we'll probably get a lot of tickets in the support. Where's my rewards? And we'll be like, where's our backhaul? So,
well, will manufacturers be able to see that data displayed on their front end? And will there be like an API for us to connect to see the data speeds?
not right away, no. We will probably implement that down the line. Right now, there is a guideline. I think I remember exactly what the rating is, but it's something like 10 up, 30 down, or something like this. It's in the FAQs published on the website. It's not a draconian requirements, but fairly basic. I would say minimum backhaul capability requirements, and it'll be somewhat binary. We'll be doing random tests against a number of trusted kind of a backhaul testing servers. There's multiple of them, and we'll be doing them kind of randomly, so that there isn't just kind of like, it's going to be hard to spoof. Let's put it this way. Maybe not impossible, but hard. And if you pass it, then you basically get the tokens. If you fail, then you won't get the tokens for the period where you have failed. And that's just kind of how it's going to work.
I have something I could share a screen if you could give me the permission there.
Sure.
On the docs.helium.com, there is describes all of the phases here and does indeed go into some requirements that Boris is talking about. So if you go to docs.helium.com and you see on the sidebar 5G on Helium, and then 5G proof of coverage, that's what we're talking about, right? Is the different phases of proof of coverage. So it talks about how often speed test currently is going to be designed to be running, and it talks about what those minimum download and upload requirements are, as well as a latency check. Want to make certain that it's 50 milliseconds or less, and some additional requirements in there. So if anybody is really wants to geek out what that is currently being proposed, as Jess is showing, you can go there and find more of that information.
Great. Thank you for sharing this. What section was that in?
On the sidebar on the left, it says 5G on Helium.
5G.
And if you break that up, you will see 5G proof of coverage.
There we go.
Talks about the roadmap, and as you get to see the Genesis phases, and of course, we've just been talking about phase 3, which will just simply be rolling in the quality service and speed tests.
Oh, perfect. All right. Well, we'll leave that for the users to dig in and explore, and we'll have that in the links in the show notes. And did you have any questions?
Actually, yeah, I wanted to mention something relevant to the mobile Genesis that they dropped. Do you have the page that you can share?
Can you see this now?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay.
So this is not live yet, but this is our calculator page. We're hoping that we can get this launched sometime either this week or maybe early next week. So what people are seeing here is basically kind of a leaderboard of what's happening every day. So you see the countdown. The numbers are probably not accurate. This is just a mock-up. Let's say there's only 100 days for mobile Genesis, and you can see a countdown, and there's 85 days left, or how many days left. And you can also compare to the previous day how many tokens are being dropped to the radios, and compared to today, you can see what is the token drop reduction. And then you can also import a mobile price. Right now, there are some unofficial Telegram OTC groups where you can trade. And I think unofficially, these have been trading between 0.002 to 0.0045. This changes every day, but then it's up to the users. You can always come here, input the number, and to see based on the value of the day or whatever value they believe mobile token is, they will see if they buy an indoor radio, an outdoor, or a high gain outdoor, how much mobile tokens they're going to make. And then at the second or the bottom half of this page is the ranking. And you will notice it actually says mobile wallet ranking. So all of these number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, these are wallet addresses. But then it's very difficult to really display all those super long wallet addresses with, I don't know, 30, 50 characters. So this is actually relevant to a feature within the Bobber app. Because what we do with the Bobber app is that once we deep link the app with a Helium wallet, then the Bobber app automatically generates a 3-word wallet name ending with an occupation. So the hotspot ends in an animal name and the wallet ends with an occupation. And you can see spy, scientist, or translator. All of these are wallet addresses. And then this is the daily ranking. So you will see of all of those thousands of wallets that are making mobile tokens every single day, who is getting the most of mobile tokens on that day. And we can more or less going to gather, how many radios indoor, outdoor these wallets have.
When is this launching? Like, is this? Can you show me a picture? But like, is it gonna be live soon?
Yes, this will be live pretty soon. Fingers crossed, maybe this week or next week. Hopefully, by the time this video launches.
Oh, awesome!
Wanted to shout out to our community members on Discord. I think the member that you're referring to, Ann, his name is Keith R, and he posted a summary. And he's doing a significant amount of work there to compute all of these from the available blockchain data. Certainly, there's more that can be done and be exposed to get these sort of displays. Certainly see the need for it.
Definitely shout out to Keith.
That's very cool. I'm very excited about this. This will be good for everyone to be able to view this type of data in real time and check daily to see how their earnings are going. All right, great. So let's move on to some more news that's happening in the last week and days. So let's switch to some major news that's happened recently, coming from Helium and FreedomFi. Perhaps equally, if not more exciting news, Nova has acquired FreedomFi. Boris, what more can you tell us about the acquisition and what it means for Helium, for the Helium network, and for FreedomFi?
Well, I'm now very rich, and I'm purchasing my own private island, and I'm retiring. So this is the last podcast that I'm doing. Thank you very much.
See ya.
So, well, I mean, I think that this is probably the most natural acquisition that could have happened ever, because effectively for the last, I would say, a year, we have been working as somewhat of an extension of the Helium and Nova and the Foundation team on all things related to Helium 5G, from kind of conceptualizing, of what it is to, writing a variety of HIPs and proposals that ultimately led us to, where we are today, to launching the first gateway, to working with various manufacturers in the Helium ecosystem, like Bobcat, to enable them to launch similar 5G compatible products. And all of that, throughout, we've been doing with tremendous support from both the foundation and the members of the Nova Labs team. So I think that, it's, there's not a lot of sort of like a, post-acquisition integration changes that need to happen. And there's not even a lot of, I would say, external, like outbound communication or just like shifting around, because a lot of it has already happened over the last year and a half as we're kind of gradually integrating ourselves with the, the Nova team. I am personally like very excited that, we are now members of the, of Nova. I think it'll allow us to go faster. One thing that's kind of always been a problem is, while we are kind of all moving in the same direction, we're still two separate companies. So what do we share with them and what do they share with us? And, we're sitting in different, like we're sitting in Slack and everybody at Nova was sitting in Discord, and there were these like thin lines of communication back and forth. So a lot of that is solved for good now, in that, I think that a lot of the folks on the Nova team will have first-hand understanding of like everything that we're doing on the FreedomFi side, our goals, our roadmaps, etc., and the other way around. And we can go a lot faster together than it was possible before. But as far as any like dramatic shifts or changes to strategy or anything like that, I don't anticipate really anything like that happening. So I guess that's kind of a brief summary. But we can go deeper or can answer any specific questions about this.
Yeah, I can say, at least from the being on the Nova side of this acquisition, that it's incredible to work with the FreedomFi engineers and have them suddenly just appear in our channels, because we're excited about radio stuff and networking and the distributed nature of blockchains, and they have a lot of experience with that too. But having access to such resources and know so much about the incredibly complex world of telecommunications and modern telecom, the 3G PPP stack, there are all of these acronyms that even I, as a super nerd, have a hard time handling. And to be able to dial up Boris or Joey, any of the team members there, and ask these questions and get really awesome answers and feedback. It's like pouring gas on something that's already an incredible bonfire in a good way in terms of how fast things get.
I have a question, since I'm a seller of both your products from the FreedomFi and the Bobber 500. When you guys were experiencing the supply chain shortage during COVID, has that all caught up? Do you think, as a just an industry, is that all caught up with everyone, and now everyone's appetite to get more miners, or is that what do you see that in kind of the hardware space, even though you're a software company? Any predictions there?
I think it's caught up, frankly. So, over the last year, since the moment that we announced even the 5G initiative, we were kind of able to align the ecosystem around the opportunity much better. It was the very first time I remember, shortly after we launched, and we got over 10,000 people subscribed to the waitlist. We, came over to like Circom and buy cells, and we're like, okay, well, we need to purchase 10,000 small cells from you. And they're like, what? Like 10,000 small cells? Like we don't, we not, they don't have like, it's an orders of magnitude more than they've ever sold to like anybody for CBRS in the US. So now, they kind of understand what the demands are. So, and in the beginning, they didn't believe it, right? They're just like, what is this weird crypto blockchain stuff? We sell to, AT&T and Verizon. So who are you guys? You're clowns.
Yeah.
But now
you're in town.
Exactly. So now I think that there's been kind of a lot more awareness on the supply side among the radio manufacturers. The LoRa bottleneck has gone. So I think that the network will be scaling much, much quicker. And on that note, I'm very excited to see that, we are currently adding something like, close to 1,500 radios, like every 30 days. That's going up. Some of that are out of the existing supply that has been sold, and some of them are just people buying new radios, which is nothing compared to 100,000 per month that we saw with LoRa. But given the complexity of the deployments, this is like an unheard of speed. Because if you look at some of the biggest CBRS kind of neutral host networks that are out there that maybe have been deployed by the cable operators like Spectrum, they have like sub 1,000 cells after years of bringing those networks up. And we're bringing up, almost 1,500 every 30 days. We're getting contacted by different vendors in the ecosystem, like the SaaS operators, and they see the cells lighting up, and they're like, how is this happening? Like, what are you doing? How are you certifying the cells? How are they getting deployed? So I'm pretty excited to see just already like the stage that we're at right now. I think it's pretty amazing.
It's definitely a pretty incredible journey. I feel like it was just recently that you guys proposed the grant to Helium. Was it less than 2 years already since you put up the grant?
I think it was like a year and a half.
Yeah.
So HIP 27.
Did you imagine it would explode this quickly?
Well, actually, I imagine it would explode a lot quicker because it took us forever, like in the hips to figure all this out, right? So it was first it was HIP 27, then it was HIP 37, then it was HIP 51, like hip upon hip. But finally we got here.
That's the fun of being part of a decentralized network. You have to vote on everything, and it takes a little bit of time. All right. I'd like to move on to a little bit of a different topic around 5G approval process and how that works. The 5G approval process gets sent through, so any new products get sent through the MCC, formerly the MOC. The MCC is the Manufacturer Compliance Committee, which oversees all of the approval of the hardware and software which gets added to the Helium network. This is the governing body that ensures that we adhere to the rules and regulations set up by the committee. Maybe, Jeremy, can you give us a little bit insight into the background of how things get approved on the 5G end and whether the systems are going to be a little bit easier now that FreedomFi is now working with, or a part of Nova now, and what that might look like for us moving forward and getting new models approved and any kind of hurdles that might come up that you can tell us about.
Yeah, certainly. So the process which sort of endows this audit and approval for manufacturers to get onto the blockchain and sell and become part of the reward system is all part of what we call HIP 19, which classically was written for the LoRaWAN side of Helium, and that will continue to function in that way. If you were to read the HIP 53 requirements, and again, that's the Helium 5G sub-DAO, as we're calling it, it's really handy to look at the structure there, particularly the within that there's a diagram which shows all of the moving parts of the 5G system as proposed. And it's significantly more complicated than the LoRaWAN side. And if you look in there, we've got things like oracles going through, hotspot vendors, hotspot operators, and in the future, mappers for going through proof of coverage. We've got these emission contracts, and then in there we have mobile stakers and some operational funding. And there's a lot more infrastructure that vendors need to run for 5G than they did if it barely anything. Well, they did have to run some infrastructure to support a LoRaWAN hotspot. For 5G, it's a lot stronger. There's more things that have to be done. So the foundation is working to write all the requirements, and bringing in vendors, FreedomFi, Nova Engineering, to get it nailed down exactly what has to be in a hotspot, and more importantly, what does it mean to be a vendor in this system? And if you look in the HIP, it talks about the fact that vendors are going to need to run significant part of the Magma infrastructure. And Magma is this open source radio stack. Really wonderful part, and part of what makes FreedomFi amazing is they're one of the significant developers of Magma, and having that into the system is incredibly useful. So having to run Magma components and things on the vendor, each vendor is going to have to be responsible for their part of it, as well as the requirements are going to need really from all parts of the ecosystem. That means potential wireless mobile network operators, and for hotspot owners themselves and the vendors, and of course the blockchain wanting to know that everything's being reported correctly. The security requirements are probably going to be significantly higher than what traditionally with LoRa you could have kind of got by with what's Raspberry Pi, which also is really hard to find in demand right now. For the 5G, it's going to have to be a little bit more powerful. And to make certain that there's less hacking going on, we're probably going to need things like secure boot, very strict hardware secure boot. So all of these things are kind of up in the air, trying to be nailed down very quickly. And any vendors who want to apply in there, we need to get the word out exactly what those requirements, minimum requirements are, so that we can get as many, hotspots out there as we have done with LoRaWAN. We want to see the same thing going on with 5G. The success of it is really just massive, widespread deployments. So the short answer is it's complicated. It will be more complicated than for the LoRaWAN side. And I wish we had more foundation, especially Sophie, who does some of the audits, and Christina, who could talk more about what it is as an auditing side. People who are mostly users of the network rarely get to see what those audits are, but they are done and the reports are published, and those are forwarded on to the rest of the MCC so they can say, all right, this looks like it's good or it's deficient here. That process is a little bit harder to see day to day, but it is there.
I wanted to try and go back to Jeremy, if you could maybe answer this question for me. There's only one company connected to the Magma, or has a Magma connection set up for the Helium network, and that's FreedomFi at the moment, right? And then us at Bobcat, we utilize the software and the legwork and all the hard work that FreedomFi has done to set this up for us. So if another manufacturer wanted to do this, they would have to basically do all the hard work that FreedomFi did also, and then create a whole new system to get approved if they're not partnering with FreedomFi, or I guess it'll be Nova now, or I'm not sure how that delineation happens moving forward. But in that case, all of the radios that are certified and working on the network through FreedomFi, any radio that's currently out there is using FreedomFi software and Magma gateway connection, security, and everything else. So if a new manufacturer were to spin up, they would have to build that software, that security, and then build their own radios that aren't on the network or aren't yet approved through the network yet.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts. As far as the foundation and the MCC are involved, really, you just want to see that for each hotspot being sold, that it's going to be administered by a technically competent organization that has the hardware requirements in it, and has the back end requirements that are in there, and has the support that's going to be needed to keep it running for a while, right? And that could be accomplished any number of ways. Partnering with an existing organization is clearly one way, but if you're, really strong in the sort of cloud thing and understand Magma, certainly I could see manufacturers going it on their own. We want to make it possible. Again, it's just that the requirements are there, and anybody can fit that requirement. So there's certainly, as in Bobcat's case, they are partnering with FreedomFi for some of those components, and that's fine. And just in the application, they're going to have to list, how are you going to provide the Magma services on the back end for this? Are you prepared for it? And it just needs to be shown in the plan. And there will be, I believe Sophie knows more about this. Some of that will actually be tested. The hotspots actually are sent to the foundation's kind of lab for testing this, and those parts of Magma that need to be working will be tested against the gateways. I'm going to say gateway, in this case of Magma gateway, the Magma it's actually called an orchestrator, if you've been familiar with deep of that, for that particular vendor. That'll be part of the testing requirement. But there's no requirement that has to be done through FreedomFi or through Nova. In fact, we want it to be as open as possible in the aims of being a decentralized wireless project.
I want to follow up on something you mentioned earlier about secure boot. This is probably more relevant to, say, convertible hotspots. We know that Minted or Rack, everybody knows that they're coming out with a convertible, but I think more than them, there are also other LoRa hotspot makers that's already announcing that, our hotspot is now convertible ready or 5G ready. Can you maybe talk a little bit more about that? Because I think users are very interested, because when they buy a hotspot, especially if they already have a LoRa hotspot, they want to know, can I actually just, wait for this one to become convertible and then just get whatever accessories necessary for it? From our perspective, of course, we see whether, limitations or, when that hotspot was shipped out to customer, whether it was designed and really had the capacity or bandwidth for it. But we also wanted to see, like, from the MCC, are you seeing a lot more requests or a lot more actions in this area, and what do you think about this?
Yeah, so the MCC actually hasn't received any serious requests yet. People have been talking about it and working their back end and trying to get the requirements gathered, and they're working with other vendors too, especially around that secure boot. From what we're working with Helium Engineering, Nova Engineering, and the foundation to really narrow down what has to be really tightly secured in here. Especially things that we call something called a settlement service, which is part of in the existing LoRaWAN technology we have these state channels, and in state channels, hotspots are rewarded for the packets they transfer to routers, which are the other entities in the system, people who actually are hosting sensor deployments, things like that. And that happens, and that procedure is slow. The packets are slow enough; they can be counted by both sides, and a hotspot can say, "Hey, I have proof that I was paid for this packet," and the router can say, "Yes, I agree to pay for that." If there's a dispute, there's a mechanism on the blockchain to do that. When you're talking about, instead of 24-byte packets, gigabytes of data, that process has to change a little bit. So there's things like settlement services where MVNOs, the companies that would use this wireless network, want to be assured that the byte counts that they're transferring to these handsets, to people on their phones, agree with what the hotspot says it's doing. For example, hotspot also wants to be rewarded for all the traffic that it's transferred on behalf of that mobile subscriber. And so the settlement service is something that's involved there, and for that to be really truthful, and we don't want discrepancies, we want to make certain that the firmware on the hotspot, it can't be adjusted by someone at the hosting end to artificially inflate the counts or undercount. Actually, that would be kind of silly for you to undercount your own data, but the things like that are really important, keeping the whole ecosystem run. So if a manufacturer wants to upgrade an existing hotspot, there are several actual hotspot designs out there that because I'm a tinkerer and I've been involved with MCC, and every HIP-19 operator does post their designs. You get to go and log in there and see how they're going to design the board. Some are, I believe, going to be capable of, at least on the security side, to do it. Some it may be more of a challenge, but I don't want to discount them out. As long as you can meet that guidelines there, having what I call a hardware root of trust secure boot, I think is really a requirement. Because people like me who are actively trying to find ways that you could defeat that system. It's part of my joy in life is hacking into things. And I really want to see a system that is impossible for me to break into and abuse. And that gives us a lot of confidence that others out there, and we have other parts of the community too. Within the foundation, we have the POC Security Working Group, a defined group of people who kind of recruit, and they sort of self-select, who are as paranoid or even more than I am. I can lean on. And so working with them, working with the engineering teams, and working with potential MNOs and the people who are involved with all of this, I'm going to call it the many-layered telco stack cake, we've learned that it's going to be really important to have the secure boot. So whether any one particular manufacturer can do it or not, I'm certain there's many ways to retrofit an existing hotspot. I'm curious to see them. I've heard there's several of them that are working on ways to take an existing very cheap hotspot, and as long as it can meet some of those engineering requirements and that security requirements, it should be a really fantastic day if we can turn them into gateways on the 5G system.
What about 5G for Europe? I mean, we've been all very excited and happy because we're getting mobile tokens, and there's another part of the world that are still anxiously waiting. I know right now on Discord where people just say yes, not ready, maybe it's never, but I think there are some grants in Europe that people already started looking at how to make it work, and potentially maybe even work with local authorities. Any actual progress on this end where we can tell our users and customers in Europe, be excited. There's more news coming out.
So there's two sides to this puzzle when it comes to non-US deployments for the Helium mobile network. One side of the puzzle is spectrum availability. CBRS spectrum, which is where, what we're using for the US is only available in the US today, although there are evolving permutation of similar type of lightly licensed spectrum bands that are evolving in other countries. They don't quite work the same way as CBRS, but they are even similar frequencies, just, licensed differently. The that piece that needs to be solved. And I think that the fastest way that we will solve it for the mobile rollout is going to be around introducing a Wi-Fi based offload hotspot. This is something that we've been talking about at FreedomFi for a long time. I think this still very much remains a priority for Nova as well. This will allow us to get global reach, and I think that also significantly decrease the price point of the mobile offload hotspot. The second kind of a less obvious piece of the puzzle is the offload partners, because of how cellular works. Almost every country has their own small handful of carriers that have the spectrum assets and have a subscriber base. So it's not like there is like a 1 mega carrier that you partner with, and all of a sudden you have a subscriber base that can, take advantage of its global network. And deploying a network, Wi-Fi or lightly licensed spectrum, absent the demand side, is not a great strategy. So for that other piece, we actually have ongoing trials with a couple of operators in Europe and a couple in South and Central America, but they are not nearly as far along as where we are with respect to actually creating demand for the US. So because of that, I think the short answer is that until we are more confident that there's going to be user demand outside of the US for the network, we won't be pushing on it hard. Because I understand on the one hand the desire of a lot of vendors that have relationships and can maybe have access to spectacular vertical real estate place radios overseas, placing radios just so that they're there and so that they mine for POC is not long-term sustainable. So it's going to come, but I think that it'll take a little bit of time for us to really get there.
All right. I'm going to try and move on and kind of tie it into a little bit of what we were talking about. But I want to talk about 5G business use cases. Perhaps right now we're seeing more residential installations from individual miners where there's a lot of room for 5G utilities by small businesses, private enterprise, etc. A frustration people had with the Helium LoRaWAN network getting rolled out is that a lot of people were still taking time for us to see any real use cases at scale for deployment commercially. Andy, I'll open this up to you. What do you think about these issues we've seen in the past with LoRaWAN, and as a GC for IoT and cellular businesses, what do you think is going to happen with 5G Helium?
Yeah, thanks. I wear the GC of IoT badge very proudly. Not a general counsel, but general contractor. So, we're recently on a Helium Uplink episode, and they've asked me a very similar question. And, my feeling with Helium 5G is, if you look at every home, there are certain utilities that you pay based on usage. Your water, your electricity, but there are certain utilities that you pay a flat fee, and that's your internet. Right, and your internet, it's not consumed 24/7, so most of us are probably not at home or something. So that to me is a utility that needs to be utilized to the max, because you're not going to pay any more for it. And being involved in public internet projects where it may surprise you, but during COVID in 2020, our San Jose mayor wrote an op-ed, and there were 8,500 children in Silicon Valley, probably even San Jose, that did not have internet access, right? In Silicon Valley, which is a shocker. And that is because they depended on that network to go at school. And when no one could go to school, they did a fun in order to do that. And I thought, how cool would it be is that if we could have the Helium 5G network be kind of this Johnny on the spot internet. Like, so someone needs to invent a Helium 5G USB dongle so that I can plug it in. And if I happen to be in a park and I want to connect and John or Sally is on the Helium network, I can, plug that in. And then, of course, that hotspot owner would be compensated for their usage of the internet that they're probably not maxing out anyways, right? So I think smart city, smart school districts, are a shoe-in because you have low speed, lower WAN, and you've got high speed CBRS, right? So I think those are two different use cases. And I think right now, yes, we're building out the network, and I tip my hat to the Helium model. They're doing something that to build a network. If you look at Explorer, what took the carriers 30 years to do, they did it in 3, more or less, right? And so maybe Boris will do it in 2. I don't know, but I think more end devices need to be created because LoRaWAN before Helium, there were a ton of LoRaWAN devices from the sensor and tracking side already. Because the adoption, you're right, Jess, that it's been slow, and what we're seeing is we want to track things, we want to sense things when things are leaking, things have gone wrong. Is it still there? But that's certainly not a household name yet. Not like the Nest thermostat is kind of a household name. We got to get to that point. Right. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to come with our own company. We're trying to release Helium home kits, right? So that it's, I call it the honey, did you do this list yet? Say, honey, did you close the door? Honey, did you close the garage? Honey, did you do this? Well, that could be solved with IoT, right? And so that's my hope is that that we'll get to that point where the entire home will be Heliumized. So.
So I have a question for Boris, actually, following on this business use case. I think this is how the LoRa hotspot really got started and got picked up by the community. We are still seeing more individual customers. They're buying this. There's, some are stacking radios, but some are setting these up as their residential homes. Some are being a little bit more ambitious in setting up maybe at coffee shops or near a football stadium. Have you, or are there any demands more on a business scale, like even like a private enterprise or customers that are not, first primarily a crypto focus? I think this right now is more like crypto focus. And by the way, if I can set up and use the network, great. Are you seeing any customers that are primarily use case focused and crypto is kind of like a nice to have?
Well, I have a few things to say about that because at FreedomFi, we started specifically as a company focusing on those use cases. We did not get into crypto until maybe like a year into our journey when we met Helium. And initially, our focus was basically a private LTE, fixed wireless access, and sort of mobile broadband in developing countries. This were like the 3 categories of customers that we've had that we've deployed Magma-based networks for. I think that now in the Nova paradigm, it's very important for us to focus on a use case instead of spreading ourselves thin. Luckily, with cellular and mobile, and unlike with LoRa, it's not like there is a multitude of varying use case and it's unclear like which one's biggest. Like there is a very clear, simple use case for mobile, and that is mobile broadband, and that is connectivity to your phone. And that is 99.9% of the data usage around the world in the mobile networks today. And I think it'll remain like that for a while. So we very much want to, first of all, like focus on cracking that nut properly first before we expand into things like, fixed wireless access or private networks. So, it's a great space for probably the community to innovate, but like, for us as, Nova now, I think we want to focus on mobile broadband.
Makes sense. All right. Thank you for that, Boris. Really good news coming up soon, which I'm excited about, and hopefully we can learn a lot of new things. Is Helium House NYC is happening on September 20th. That's going to be Helium House is an event for the Helium community to come together and celebrate the growth of the People's Network, and then excuse me, and announce new things coming to the network. I wanted to open up, see if there's any kind of Easter eggs anyone can help allude to or let us know about that they might be sharing at Helium House, either from Nova or FreedomFi.
Well, what can I say without sort of ruining the excitement and the wow factor? I think that I can speak about just like general buckets of things. So there is I think a lot of questions around like what's going to happen as far as smarter ways to reward coverage, because right now coverage is rewarded, like I said, in a pretty dumb way, where you have your radio working, you get tokens, and we in fact have like people that are putting like 90 radios in like one room to get tokens, and we're kind of like, maybe they shouldn't do that, but on the other hand, like we made the rules, we can't tell them not to follow the rules that we made, so this has to go away. And I'm suggesting like whoever right now is actually, basically trying to take advantage of it, it's not going to last very long. So if you're actually climbing roofs and you're spending effort deploying radios, I strongly recommend that you do that the right way instead of trying to, put in like 50 radios on one roof pointing into like one forest. Very soon your rewards will go away and you'll have to climb roof again and take those radios down and either sell them or put them somewhere else. We'll have some more specifics about, what that means, that we'll talk about and kind of dedicate cycles, kind of educating community at the Helium House. So that's one box.
Going back to the point where you mentioned, hey, just don't climb up the roof and do all that and have to redo it all over again. Do you have any advice on like, say, how many radios per gateway is too many? Or, for example, the users, if you're climbing up the roof right now, can you maybe give a more concrete examples? What is a bad outdoor installation right now that they might try not to do?
Yeah, so the radios per gateway, I've mentioned this before. There isn't really a hard limit, but we now have, thanks to Jeremy, by the way, all 3 ports working on the FreedomFi edition of the gateway. So, and when we initially built it, there was a reason why we put in 3 ports. So that I think that like 3 is a good number of radios. Although you don't have, you can, if you want to do a more weird setup and do a switch, then, you can have multiple radios per gateway. The limiting factor is the gigabit port that we have on it, and also ultimately like the usage that you will expect to get. But I would not do more than, I would say, 5, 6 maybe. 3 is okay. You can never go wrong with like 1-to-1 coupling. So that's the guidance on the radios per gateway. As far as the other part about the climbing roofs and good locations, so you want to place the radios in locations where there is a lot of slow moving people, basically. So that's kind of probably like the best guidance that I can give. It can be indoors and you can use indoor radios for that, or it can be outdoors. So if you have, a balcony overlooking Times Square, if you have the money to buy an apartment like that and you want to put a radio there, then that's kind of like a good location, right? Or if you are like, if you own a coffee shop, the traditional example, right? Or a library or whatever, you don't want to be putting them next to freeways because like the phones won't connect to the small cells that have limited coverage if there's cars zooming by. This is what the macro cells are for. Generally, like the offload small cells, they're designed for like fairly dense areas where people are, not moving very quickly. And you want to be basically, like pointing your cells towards those locations, or the antennas on the cells, not that you connect to them, towards those locations. If you're deploying multiple cells, I would say that, make sure that you have them pointing in different locations. Like we've seen setups where people would like have a rid of the indoor cells, and they would have literally like 15 indoor cells pointing in the same exact direction. Like this is just not going to work. Like, once we move to the smarter rewards, you will earn 0 mobile for that kind of setup, because not only is it, not good, it's actually like bad, because you're just creating like like probably your cells, like your phone will probably want to connect to your cells because you're just creating like noise and interference, and it's just bad. So point your cells in different directions. And also be cognizant that CBRS band is very sensitive to attenuation, unlike LoRa. So if you, have a cell pointing a brick wall, and then there's maybe people like on the other side of that brick wall, like they won't be able to see that. So if there is, maybe some trees or bushes, that's okay, but don't expect that the signal will penetrate through hard obstacles very well. Soft obstacles, okay. If you get line of sight to people with phones, that's a lot better. But again, we see people that are like mounting stuff on their balconies, and they just point it to like a forest, and they're like nowhere, right? Like there's no people there, just trees. So unlikely that anybody will ever connect to your cells. Like you're not going to be gaining like miles and miles to the city connectivity with CBRS. So, and one of the roadmap items for us is to really evolve the Explorer to make it a tool that will assist in some of this decision making. So you'll be able to see, like more or less what is the actual coverage that your cell provides, not just, is this hex purple or is it not, but, taking into account some of the clutter data that we have about particular locations, and taking into account the information that we have about what your cell is and where it's pointing, to be able to actually see what approximately you're covering. And also we'll be marking up some of the, sort of hexes as ones that we recommend versus not recommend. So one is just basically provide much more decision support data in a programmatic way for people to understand where to put cells and where not to put cells. I think we'll be making some announcements with respect to the, some of the hardware roadmap. I'll just kind of leave it at that for now. But, again, new opportunities both for the, community to get plugged in, and for the users to, be deploying the network more effectively. So that's one part. And also, obviously, everybody has questions about like what's going to happen. Where's the demand going to come from? Like, who are the offload partners? Where the user is going to come from? How the data is going to be driven, etc. So we'll definitely have some, I think, very exciting updates on that front. What I can share without sharing too much.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Yeah, for dynamite tips to like what you're going to find at Helium House, the best way to know it's going to be at Helium House, New York City, September. I can't remember the date. I should know. 26th?
20th.
Is to be there.
Great. I think we have some questions around mappers. I know recently some of the Helium documentation got updated around rewards for people who are just getting heartbeat rewards right now. So if you're online and you're connected in such a way, you're getting a reward. But I think they changed it recently to say you'll also need to be mapped at some point to start receiving the rewards for mobile. Can someone explain a little bit more about the kind of the recent updates and how that might change with getting heartbeat rewards and not being rewarded until you're mapped, or give some clarity there?
At first, it is described in the roadmap. We want to go back to the docs.helium.com. So we're specifically talking about, we've been talking about stage one, phases within stage one. Mappers come into play in what's called stage two. Yeah, you're right. It is a little bit empty there, but maybe Boris knows a lot more what's going to be on. But just kind of reading from there, it is saying that we're going to have to transition from this very simple, what we call the genesis phase, where you're just simply being rewarded for having a radio, to being rewarded for having a radio with real verified coverage, and starting to get into some of the real fun parts, at least for me, that we have from LoRaWAN, which is trying to prove that not only is your radio up and running and it's providing service, it's providing service in the location that you are, in addition to that bandwidth check too. So that we have the whole blockchain has a really good idea of what is an effective radio.
So in that case, if we're technically we are in stage two now, I guess maybe at Helium House we might learn a little bit more about the mappers and what might be.
Well, I should correct that a little bit. We're in stage one, phase two.
Okay, stage one, phase two.
So that's why I would try to raise that up. That it's sub clause 2 within main clause 1. Sure. This would be stage 2, which is the end of phase. Let's see, the last thing will be phase 5. Use the phase 5 of step 1 before we go to stage 2.
What about, I think some time ago, Solana had a pre-order of their free phones. And even at the time back then, I think there were a lot of excitement on Discord saying, oh, maybe Solana and Helium can work on something together, and Solana phone mapper. Now that this is even more imminent, are we seeing this happening maybe sometime next year? Or even let's say if it's not a Solana Web3 phone, is a cell phone mapper somewhere on the roadmap already?
Cell phone mapper is definitely in the works. So I think that the ability to have a lot of mappers out there and paint an accurate coverage picture is a huge priority. A cell phone mapper will never be as efficient at mapping as a dedicated mapper, and as such, likely will not be as good an earner when it comes to the rewards attributed to the mappers. But on the flip side of that, like the barrier to entry, because everybody has a cell phone, right, is lower. You don't need to have a dedicated device. So we'll definitely have a cellular-based mapping capability down the line.
There is something that Amir has also shown. You've seen a picture of something. He's held it in his hand. I can just describe what it is. I can't necessarily tell you what it is, but it had some lights on it that talked about LoRa, 5G. I think it had BLE and maybe a power. That is going to be shown around at Helium House. And it'll be exciting to talk about what that is and what it does. So definitely go for that.
It may or may not be a mapper.
Would the cellular or cell phone version of a mapper, would that require a specialized SIM card or a specific SIM card if it's not to be able to map that? Or because I know the HIP64 talked about mapping with cell phones for Wi-Fi when that comes out, and I don't think that would require a SIM card. But if a phone became a mapper, would it require a SIM card to do that mapping for cellular coverage?
Yes, it will require a SIM card, either physical or an eSIM.
Okay.
Today, if you hit Google, they're kind of quietly mapping already if you have an Android, particularly, right? So when you use your phone, it's quietly sending to a database, and we at Tracking for Less, we pull on that database. So that's how we can track indoors and outdoors. So we use a database Google provides, because as you're walking through a mall or whatever, that information might be cellular triangulation indoors or GPS. So Google just hasn't tokenized it, but they're kind of doing the mapper already for the greater use of everything. So.
Yeah, if you look at the roadmap, I mean, mapping is clearly a part of meeting all the coverage proving goals of the 5G.
Okay, I want to move on to the last topic. What do we think about 5G for the rest of this year and moving into the rest of next year? So the closing topic is, what can we expect moving forward?
I feel like I almost kind of answered this question by sharing the 3 buckets of, some of the important announcements that we'll be making at the Helium House, but I can kind of reiterate. So the more updates on the demand side, the service providers and offload partners and stuff like that. I think that's really key, right? Because unless we solve the demand side, this whole network is somewhat useless, I would argue. And we want to make sure to really focus on have a very specific strategy when it comes to the demand side of the network. So, a lot of the effort is going to be has been and will continue going into actually, solving for the demand side on the network. 2 is making sure that people are much better at creating coverage in places where it matters versus stacking radios on top of each other, and providing the necessary updates to the sub-DAO, as well as building the tooling, like, a smarter version of the Explorer to aid this type of deployment patterns. And finally, I think is the hardware roadmap, not least of which is more cost-effective radios and Wi-Fi access points, and simplification of the whole deployment process, which part of it is like a technology piece, right? Just, making the software better, making plug and play work better. But the other part of it is just the whole experience, right? So I think a lot of what Andy was talking about, coupling and making it very simple. If I don't want to deal with it, I just want the radio to appear on my roof. I just have a roof that's good, I know. Come make it happen there and send me the tokens. That needs to be much smoother than it is right now, where people just have to be posting on Craigslist or climbing their own chimneys and stuff. So these are, the important sort of buckets and vectors across which we expect tremendous improvement, in the coming quarters.
Just make a quick prediction. Yeah, I mean, for the rest of the year, I think as the network starts to grow, people are going to want to ask, what is the network going to, from a savings perspective? Because as an MVNO, people, measure a carrier by what am I paying price per gigabyte, right? So at some point, I think that will come out. That hopefully will be 100x orders of magnitude as what we've seen with LoRaWAN. We'll see. And I think in the U.S., if you look around, there's hundreds of mom and pop carriers that the big 4, the big 3 now, roam on, and most of us don't know that. And so I wouldn't be surprised if some of these mom and pop carriers open up the ability to roam on the biggest mom and pop carrier, which is the FreedomFi. Helium 5G. So my prediction is that once that starts opening up, there's going to have a whole new class of applications, and then of course the SIM card will have to be universal. So that's my crystal ball.
That's amazing. Actually, I think maybe right. And the beautiful thing about like the journey that we're on is that I think, at least with LoRa, I've definitely seen it to be true, and I think it's going to be very much true in case of mobile as well. Is that like the community tends to take this places where like it's hard to imagine, because it's not just about I think the folks at the Helium Foundation or at Nova Labs. It's the entire ecosystem that is innovating around this and coming up with like absolutely crazy but brilliant ideas as to how to make this thing work. So your crystal ball may very well be right, and I'm very much excited to see like what other crystal ball type of revelations that I personally haven't thought of could come into play.
I'll text you later, but thank you. Yeah, I'm excited too.
So we also just had some really interesting news come out, I guess yesterday or the day before, that I'm very excited about, is that there's HIP 70 just got released, which is the migration from the Helium blockchain to the Solana blockchain. This would be a pretty big shift in how the network operates. And it seems like a logical step forward, and it seems to have the full support of the Helium Foundation to do this. So odds are it will most likely pass. And that could have some really interesting ramifications, knowing that there's been a Solana phone recently that got announced and some other things. So there's some good overlap there. But I think some of the users might be interested about how that's going to affect their mobile earnings and how the tokens are going to be moved around. Maybe, Jeremy, can you kind of elaborate a little bit more about this transition if that were to pass?
Yeah, I mean, again, it is a proposal. It's nothing's ever set in stone without going through HIP vote. It is clearly one of the most important HIPs in the history of this entire network. So the idea really, and if you look a lot of what Amir has said, Amir, the CEO of Nova, and the foundation has said, that really the idea is you shouldn't, as a user of a hotspot or owner of a hotspot, someone who's interested in the token, or someone who's a user of the network, hopefully it should actually be an improvement. I mean, it will still be whatever L1 chain is it's under. The Helium token itself has its own particular value, and the tokens will be, if we move to another L1 chain like Solana, and Abai has talked a little bit about this, by Hashcode, you've met him on Discord. All of the account balances will become a token on this L1 chain. Many L1 chains have the ability to do other tokens. And in fact, some of the cryptocurrencies that you're maybe aware of are actually hosted on another L1 chain, like a big L1 chains I'm talking about, of course, Solana, Ethereum. And these mechanisms, like for example, on Ethereum, you may have heard of an ERC20 token. There are some tokens that are hosted on Ethereum, but they have their own name, and you wouldn't, unless you're deep into blockchain technology, you might not have known. So the whole point is that it will be seamless to people using the tokens, and that really underneath things can go a lot faster. So a lot of the limits that are in place will be.
Would this be a wrapped version of HNT mobile IoT, or would this be a like burn and mint conversion?
That I don't know. I think it'd be more likely to kind of be a wrapped, in that the emission schedule for HNT has been published for a long time. That's not going to change. The new scheme, wherever it's hosted, those rules still need to be in place. The total tokens that are emitted, and that's a great question for a buy, I think, in terms of those particular minute details. But certainly.
Jeremy, I'm curious, because it's going to be, or maybe we're to pass that Solana base, will that mean that the HNT will indirectly be available on more exchanges? Because there's in a couple exchanges, but it's not in every exchange. So does it make it more tradable?
I would think so. Because if you think about what it is to trade tokens amongst other nodes, and then you have to host what's called a Helium L1 node,
right?
Which is a significant investment. And as someone who does it on my home network, I'm great with it. But it's written in Erlang, not the easiest thing to bring up. So if you're really interested in doing transaction on this blockchain, you have to be really into our current L1 blockchain. And if it becomes a subtoken under another chain, all sorts of things open up. You can lend your tokens to someone that can become part of other smart contracts. I've heard a lot of different proposals. So it seems clear to me that would be clearly the case, that you would see availability of the tokens all over the world, much easier for people to have access to them and use them.
Very cool.
And that's because of the infrastructure of the Solana network and their ability to scale and distribute tokens faster and speed. Yeah. Great. All right. I'm going to leave it for closing thoughts. If anyone has anything they want to say, we'll close it out.
Shout out to Ann and the Bobcat group. They designed this awesome logo for Bob Works. So love the logo.
And we put a Bob in everywhere. With FreedomFi, it's Bob. With Mosolab, it's Mobob. And then with Embedded Works, is because we bundle with Mosolab, so it's Mobob Works.
Right. Genius marketing.
Maybe we should get a Nova Bob sometime.
There you go. There you go. Put it together, I'll make a shirt.
So I think, and first of all, I wanted to thank you guys for organizing this. I wanted just to say thank you to the community at large, because I think that what makes like the Helium ecosystem strong is the community. I know everybody has been very patient because the Helium 5G rollout has been taking longer than everybody had hoped for. It's all about small, incremental, but consistent steps, which I feel we are progressing down those steps. And, to an extent, also rolling it out in such a way that we sort of are cognizant of the community and bring everybody in the community along, I think is part of the reason why it may be taking a bit longer. But, they say that if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So this is definitely a if you want to go far type of value proposition. So we may want to be, tolerant of some of the slowness, but as a reward get to bring everybody in the community along, because I think it's only possible for us to really kind of bring something truly disruptive to the 5G market if we all work together on it. So on a personal note, just thank you everybody for kind of, sticking with us and staying loyal and, building these types of websites that show rewards and making t-shirts and making webcasts and podcasts and, all of the stuff. So
even very important,
valuable.
The memes that are generated by our community to keep us all grounded and at least some levity when things do get a little rough is one of the highlights, at least for me. But yes, just echoing Boris there, it's uncanny that you made that statement, because if no one else spoke up, that would have been actually my statement too. As someone who's come from the community and spends a lot of time there, would not be able to make this network in all of its forms without the community behind it. I think we are probably the largest, I believe, organization on Discord, stretching 80,000 people on one Discord. It drives me incredible heights to think of that. And, it's challenging, especially as a community member and who also works on the dev side, starting from the community side. It's really important to me to always be communicating, and I'm proud to be part of a team that really tries to do that. And you see that a lot of times we're really trying to be out in the open and really sometimes even working with people really angry and dissenting. And I think everyone has an important message that you can pull out and get really strong allies. And I'm very thankful for the patience of the community. And we're always looking to improve, and having that community there is a great way to keep things rolling. So echoing that same sentiment.
Well, as a community member, thank you for that sentiment, Boris and Jeremy and Andy. I think everyone really appreciates that. It's very well said. But okay, we'll close it out here. This was really great. I want to thank everyone for coming on. We really appreciate you taking the time to join us and share your insights and your knowledge and the swath of information that you can provide for us in the community. This was really engaging, and I think a lot of people really enjoy this episode. So thank you very much. And that's it. Thanks, everyone. Until next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.